Hello again. It's been a couple of hours and the gel coat's dried. As you can see, I touch my finger to it, nothing comes off. My finger isn't white. When they say tacky, it's not tacky like glue tacky. It's not slick. You know, I touch this and I don't feel any stickiness at all. There's just a little stickiness to this, so don't think that you're going to expect it to be tacky like you normally think of tacky. All right, so now I'm ready to put down the fiberglass. This is a lot more involved, a lot more difficult, and it takes a lot more practice than putting down the gel coat. So what I've done is I went to the Fiberglass Calculator online. I'll give you the link to that. And I found out how much fiberglass it's going to take to do this. With what I'm doing total between the mat and the cloth, it's going to take 8 cups of resin, and that comes to also 8 teaspoons of hardener. Each teaspoon of hardener is 5 milliliters. So what I've done is I've got the little measurement cups here, like for medicine, and I put 4 cups of resin in here and 20 milliliters of hardener in each one of these. So that's ready to go. Again, as soon as I mix those two together, it's going to start hardening. I think the can says something like 15 minutes or something like that is the standard time. That's not a lot of time when you're trying to do this, and you'll see why as I do this. All right, so first I'm going to mix this together. I'm going to put down a coat of resin all over. What that does is that eliminates or helps minimize the air bubbles. You could put the mat down right now and then work the resin in, but I found out when I do that, I tend to get more air pockets. It's just easier to go ahead and put down a layer first, then put the mat. It's a little more difficult to assemble. The reason it's more difficult to assemble is once that cloth or that mat hits this surface, it doesn't want to move. It wants to stick to exactly where you put it. If you do it now without that, you can slide it around, put it wherever you want. If you do put this onto the gel coat, because of the tackiness, when you pull it up, it takes some of the fibers off and distributes them all over. That's not a big deal. It's just I would prefer not to do that. One of the things I did is I made a paper template of this area. The reason why is you have to pre-cut your material. You don't have to, but if you don't, you will regret it at some point. All right, so I pre-cut the mat and I pre-cut the cloth that's going to go on top. Now this is a little different than what I've been talking about before, because the mat that I have is twice as thick as the stuff that I showed you in the little plastic packages. So that just means I need to double the amount of resin, which I already did. I calculated it that way. It just saves me a step. I don't have to put down 2 layers of mat. You just have to make sure you get it soaked well, because it's harder to get it to soak through than if it was just one. I have all my stuff ready. I have a paint roller with a cloth fuzzy roller. Don't use foam rollers. The the resin eats them up, I mean, within 30 seconds. So it's worthless. I tried it just to see, doesn't work. All right, get the smoothest mat you can get on this. All right, I have my Bondo Spreader. I'm going to use this after I put the cloth down to smooth everything out. I have my spatula. I have one of these to put stuff in, including my paintbrush. Okay, if I'm not doing a large area like this, I use these cottage cheese containers. Like I said, the fiberglass doesn't stick. I've used this probably half a dozen times. Each time I just, after it cures, I flex it, and you can see it doesn't stick to it at all. Okay, what I did was I put in a cup, measured out a cup, put it in here. You could use water, resin. I use resin, and then then I take a Sharpie and I mark it. So right here, and then I label it. I say there's 1 cup. I know now that it takes 1 teaspoon of MEKP to 1 cup, so I have it marked. 1 cup, 1 teaspoon. Up here is the 2 cup mark and 2 tablespoons. I'm sorry, teaspoons. All right, I'm not doing this because I want 4, and I would have to lay out 4 of these. Actually, I'd have to lay out, yeah, 4 of these. That's what I used to do. A rule of thumb when I was starting was don't mix any more than 1.5 cups at a time, because it hardens so fast that it'll end up hardening before you can use it. I've been doing this enough and have my pre-preparation down enough that I can get away with doing 4 cups, but I highly recommend you don't even try it. Not until you've got some experience. All right, the other thing to keep in mind is the more resin you have and hardener, the bigger volume, the faster it cures. So when you watch me, what I'll do is I will mix it here, and I will get as much down on the surface as quickly as possible, because it'll be a thin layer and it'll take longer to cure. If I were to leave it in this and be piddling around, that's happened to me before, I'll be piddling around trying to get this. You'll see it's kind of hard to get the mat to lay like you want. I'll be piddling, and when I come back to here, the stuff's already hardened. The stuff down here is not hardened because it's on a thin layer, but the stuff in the container is hardened. So again, just know your limitations. All right, the wind's picking up. It hasn't been windy all day, but of course when I start to do this, it's going to get windy. All right, I think that's everything. I do have the hand cleaner, hand sanitizer, if I get stuff on my hands. I also have the chip brushes to spread. And I think that's it. All right. Again, I'm watching out because of this. The other thing is, the warmer the material is, both the resin and the hardener, the faster it's going to cure. So I keep it in the shade because I don't want it to cure any faster than it is going to. Now, one of these I mixed a little hotter than the other one. The reason why is because the first one, I want time to work. The second one, I've already got everything down. I've got it laid. The cloth is way easier to lay than the mat, so I know I can do it quicker. All right. Problem is, I don't remember which one's which. And the table's not level, so it's harder to tell. 15. Okay. So this one's slightly less. And what it is, I went and measured exactly the right amount, put it into each cup, and then I added a little extra to the one. Something to be careful about is rotating your stock. It sounds bizarre, but you have to rotate your stock. When I went to put the MEK in here, apparently the hardener MEK that I had been around for a while. When I went to squeeze the tube, it broke instead of squeezing out. I ended up with MEK all over me. It squirted on my forehead. Luckily it didn't get in my eyes or the more sensitive part of my face, but I had to immediately go in and wash it off. The other thing to watch out for is I ordered a lot of cans of resin because it was getting hard to get, and I wanted to make sure I had it. And one of the cans is already curing inside. It will cure inside the can if it sits too long. It takes a long time, but you don't know how long the fiberglass resin has been sitting on the shelf in a store or in a warehouse or whatever. So I'm actually going to have to take that one back and exchange it for some that's not hardened. I couldn't even get the lid off, so that was my first sign. Use pliers to get the lid off, and then there's a little paper seal on there. I couldn't even get the paper seal. I already know I could take a screwdriver and knock it through there, but what happens, then it knocks all that stuff into the fiberglass resin, and then I fight with chips of fiberglass resin that are already hardened every time I work with it. So there's no reason they should have sent me that. So I'm gonna exchange it. All right. Probably one of my neighbors. Put the hardener in there. Take my spatula, mix up really good. Do be careful when you mix this, because you know, if you splash this on you, it's not a pleasant experience. So if you notice, I'm doing this way away from my face, and I am, even though I'm mixing it thoroughly, I'm moving slow and gently enough that I'm not making it splash. Moving it back and forth, turning it upside down, getting around all the edges. Okay, that's got it. Okay. I use the brush to clean off the spatula only because if I set this down, then it's going to get on the table or whatever I set it on. The other thing is if you leave it, it will literally glue it to whatever you're set it down on. Okay, but since I use things it doesn't stick to, it's not a big deal, it's just annoying. All right, so all I'm going to do is go through here and put the resin down. Now, I can cheat. Since all this area is like this, I can pour it. Okay. If I pour it, I want to make sure I get this off the edge, otherwise it'll make a mess. Okay, then all I have to do is spread it around. Now, you don't have to be careful about the thickness with this like you did with the gel coat. It doesn't matter because the mat and the cloth will absorb any that you have. The other thing is, if you do something like this, it's better to make the cloth oversized because you've got to pull this off when it's done, and you need something to grab onto. If you make the cloth the exact same size and make sure you soak it all the way to the edge, you're going to have a hard time getting it started to get it to come off. Once you get it started, it's fine, but getting it started a lot of times is very difficult to do. So if you watch out for that, it makes that much easier. Okay. All right, I put down a little bit too much. Not a big deal. Like I said, it'll soak up. But the problem with it is, then I've got to get it to go uphill. So I am going to try as hard as I can to get as much of this out of this valley. Again, not a huge deal. It's all going to go somewhere. And that's what I use the roller for. I use the roller to spread it out. Okay. I used to avoid using the roller thinking that it wasted a lot, but when you get to the end, you'll find out that you're squeezing so much resin out of the roller when you're using it that it really doesn't waste any at all. Okay, that's got that done. Now comes my layer of mat. So again, I created a pattern, cut out the mat to the pattern. And one of the other things is you're going to probably, if you've got a surface like this, you're going to need relief cuts. Okay. The reason why you have those is because in this case, it's going to make a curve and it's going to bunch up. If it bunches up on you, it's really hard to get that bunched up area to lay down. If you cut it, then instead of bunching up, it'll overlap. Again, it's twice as thick there, but I don't care. Okay. Oops. And now you can see that anything that's in the way is going to cause an issue. Okay. The other thing is I typically mark front, back, top, outside, inside. In this case, I don't have to because I know by the shape of looking at it, but I do that. The other thing I mark is when I do a pattern, I mark the pattern and I save them. I wouldn't have made a pattern because I thought I was only going to do 2 of these, but I need 4 of them. And if I'm going to do 4, then it's a whole lot easier to cut off a pattern. Okay, so like I said, one of the tricky issues is once this gets placed down, it's not going to want to move at all. So if in a lot of cases when I first started, I would actually tape the edge of this to the part, then I would fold this down, put it in, and then I would fold it back. The tape made sure that it started at the right spot. I don't bother doing that anymore because I don't think I need it. I could be fooling myself. Okay, so you just got to be careful when you first put it down. I make sure I've got my edge right here. I can see where that is. Okay, I also make reference marks. on where things line up, you'll see those in the cloth. I do it in the cloth more than in this. But you can see it folded under right here. Now I've got to unfold it, but when I unfold it, this is soaked with resin. Okay. I want to get the bottom edge in first because there's a low spot here, and I've got to get it to go in the low spot. You'll find out it doesn't like to go into those low spots. So if I get this edge, then I am pushing it in. If I get the other edge, the top edge, then I'm trying to pull it, and you'll find it's more difficult to pull it than to push it. Okay, now, if I use my fingers to do this, as the resin comes through, it starts getting on my fingers, and then when I touch the cloth, the mat, it gets on my hands. Squeegee. Okay. Now, instead of getting it on my hands, I get it on the squeegee. Okay. Now I can see that's off there. You can move it some, you just can't move it a whole lot. All right. So like I said, I got the bottom edge where it goes, and then I work my way up like this. And you can see as I'm working, the mat is sticking to anything it can stick to. All right, you can, up to a certain point, pull this and get the wrinkles and such out. But once it gets soaked to a certain point, you can't pull it anymore, because what the resin does, the resin eats at the binder that makes this into a solid piece instead of a bunch of little fibers. And once it's eaten up the binder, it is literally just a bunch of little fibers. Obviously, you can't pull on one end of a bunch of fibers and get everything to move. Okay. I wish I had scissors. I would cut off that part right there. Doesn't matter. It's just, it would make it a little bit easier to work. Okay. Now that I've got this down, the next step is to soak it. Okay. On this, like with the gel coat, you don't want to brush it. Now, for different reasons. The reason you don't want to brush this is, again, the fibers are starting to loosen from each other. The binder softened, and if I brush it, I'm dragging the fibers with it every time I brush it. Obviously, don't want to do that, because I'm stealing fibers from, let's say if I brush this way, I'm stealing fibers from the front to go to the back. Don't want to do that. I'd like for this to be uniform thickness. Okay, there's one of the places where it's trying to buckle up. Small ones you can get away with by absolutely saturating it with resin, because again, the binder starts breaking down. So what I'm trying to do is get a layer of resin on top of all of this and working out any air bubbles or air pockets while I'm here. Now, this center part, it's somewhat pulled away right there, but it's sat long enough that this area doesn't want to slide. When you very first put it down, sometimes you can get this to slide a little bit, and then after a while, it won't slide. Okay. Again, I've got this area here. That's a huge pocket of resin. I should not have poured it like I did. I was just trying to work fast. Okay, two reasons. One, obviously I don't want it thick, but two, it's going to harden faster. Okay, so in the interest of time, and again, I want to get this out of the container as quick as possible so I had more time to work. That's also why I'm in the shade, besides it being a little warm. I'm in the shade. I've got the canopy over me to slow things down a little bit. Now, once I get all this down, I'm going to pull the canopy away and get this thing in full sun. All right. All right, so I'm getting out as much of this as I can. Again, because I don't want it hardening in here, not that it matters. Okay, now's when the roller comes in. So you can see I've got some spots there where it's thicker than it should be. So grab my roller. And again, you got to be careful when you roll it because it pulls when you roll. So in this case, I want to roll it side to side. And then I want to get this stuff out of the bottom there. But if you can see, I don't know if you can see, but it's trying to move the fibers with the roller. So it takes a little bit of a knack to get it to roll without redistributing the fibers a lot. Okay. Now I am going to regret having poured that down in there. I'll show you in a minute, you can use the cloth to help, but that was definitely a mistake. I still make a lot of mistakes doing this. Okay. Okay, so here's what I was talking about. It's already starting to harden. Right there, right there. Those areas are going to be very hard to get smoothed out. I would have been working a little faster if I hadn't been talking and trying to explain what was going on. Okay. Now that I've got that down, I can put the cloth down. All right. The cloth I had to cut in 2 pieces because one piece wasn't long enough. So I take the cloth, do the same thing I did, put the cloth in here, trying to get it to lay as good as I can from the start. Okay. So I'm lining up this top edge because that's the easiest one to line up, getting this to lay. Ideally, you can fold this up until you get a certain amount of this laid down, and then you can work your way. So if I had not let the resin harden, this would lay real smooth, but now you can see every place where that resin hardened, it's lumpy. Not a big deal. This is the back side. The main reason I do this cloth is because you can get sharp points where this stuff sticks up. If you get resin on that, it's going to harden and it's going to make a bunch of sharp points, and it hurts. It can stab you and hurt. Okay, I've got that pretty good. Same thing here. I've got the other piece. Remember the alignment marks I talked about? There they are. So I take this and say, oh, that edge meets that, that goes there, that lays that way. Okay, I want to make sure that I get it like I want it. There we go. All right, same thing here. Now stuff is getting sticky. So I probably should have put a little less hardener in here, honestly, but it's too late now. All right, it's down. Now I need more resin and hardener. What I'm going to do is, if I can find it, there it is. I'm going to do it a cup at a time. So I'm going to pull a cup in here, and again, all I have to do is pour it up to my line. I can see through the container to where the line is. All right, then I need 5 milliliters. This is a little difficult to do. Not ideal. There we go. All right, so Stir it up. Now, I noticed that I left my roller in the sun. I wish I wouldn't have done that. As you can see, the brush, brush is already hard. That's a sign. Usually brush is one of the last things to get hard. When it gets hard, you're at the working limit of the fiberglass, which means, okay, this luckily isn't quite hard. I always have extras in case that happens. There's another brush. All right. Same thing here. Only this time you can brush it because this is cloth, so there's nothing to pick up. So the idea here is just get it as smooth as you can. So I'm smoothing the top and trying to smooth the mat underneath. And I want to get these areas down here where it's been in the sun. It cured, it cured really fast down here in the sun. So you can see that that cup was about the right amount to cover this area with a thin coat. Maybe a little bit light, but not much. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I am looking for light colored spots because a light colored spot means there's air there. I don't really, there's a couple there. So this is where it's critical to work quickly because once the surface of it hardens, these air bubbles are trapped underneath and you cannot get them out. Okay, so the idea is get this down like I just did, and then as quickly as possible get the roller and roll out any of the air pockets. You need to press hard to work those air pockets out. And because I let it cure a little too long, I have to press exceptionally hard. I wouldn't normally have to press quite so hard, but you also have to watch to make sure that you're not pulling the cloth up when you're rolling because it has a tendency to do that. And then the places where I had to cut the relief, it's also more difficult to get it to lay there. Okay. So I'm looking for wrinkles. Any place I see a wrinkle, I want to make sure I get the wrinkle out. And any place I see air pockets, I want to get the air pockets out. And you know, it's air, so it uses gravity, so you can take it like this, start from the middle, and force the air out. All right. Now, the honest truth, this sucks. Okay, normally I can get this really smooth and really nice looking, but I mixed the mixture a little too hot. Took too long to spread it. So you can see, it hardens pretty quickly. The other thing is, one of the reasons I mixed it hot was because yesterday, last night, it was heavy dew last night, and the part that I did over there got a little dew on it before I got the cover up and all that stuff. Well, this morning, even after sitting overnight, the fiberglass wasn't completely hard. So I was a little leery of the fiberglass taking too long to harden. But since then, of course, the sun's out, it's hot, humidity is probably down. I haven't checked it, but the humidity is probably down. And do be careful, I just messed it up right there. That's where the relief cut was, and the roller grabbed it. All right. It's not a big deal that this back looks less than stellar. Actually, it looks like crap because nobody's going to see it. Okay. And then typically, I'm going to run a sander over it. Oh, that's the other thing is fiberglass acts just like gel coat in that it needs wax to seal it from the surface. So this fiberglass resin has wax built into it. Works great because otherwise it would never harden. It would stay tacky, just like we talked about the gel coat doing. We wanted the gel coat to do it because we were putting this on top. We don't want this to do it because we want it completely cured. So what that means is, as long as this stuff is green, it's not hardened, I can put more layers on it. Once it's hardened, that wax is floated to the top and it will prevent any future layers from adhering well. They'll kind of adhere, but they won't adhere well. There's a spot right here that I missed. I'm trying to decide if I should mix up another batch to fix that or just leave it. Again, I've got a lot of air pockets in this, but it is what it is. And it's hardened enough to where the air is not coming back through the cloth. It's trapped underneath there, so those air pockets are there forever. All right, it's ugly, but it's done. The other advantage, I'm going to go ahead and put another layer on. The other advantage putting another layer of resin on is because when you're working with fiberglass like this, it's messy, but you know how fiberglass has a reputation of making you itch? Well, it doesn't really make you itch. What it does is anytime you cut this stuff or grind it or sand it, it breaks up into little glass fibers because that's what that material is. Well, those glass fibers are little shards, and what happens is if they get hard, which they do after you mix it with hardener, sorry, I have to do this. Let's see. Once again, 5 milliliters. Okay, they actually stab you. So you think it's itching, but if you check, you're really getting stabbed. It actually is painful. It's just not painful enough for your body to say, oh, I'm getting stabbed. It says, oh, I itch. All right. So anyway, the reason why I was bringing that up is if I put a layer of resin on top of here, when I sand, the first bit I'm sanding is not fiber. It is nothing but pure resin. The advantage of that is if I'm not cutting the fiber, it can't make me itch or get stabbed. So it just makes it more pleasant. There's times I've been able to sand and not had to worry about itching because of that, because I put enough resin on there on a top coat that when I sanded, I was merely sanding the resin, not sanding the fiberglass. If it's cool, it's obviously a good idea to wear long sleeves. It's hot today. Believe it or not, here it is, day after Christmas, or 2 days after Christmas, and it's hot. But that's living in Texas. I'd much rather have this than I've got friends that live up north and they're complaining about the cold. So I can't really complain about what we got. I notice I left an edge right here of the cloth that there's no resin on. 2 reasons. One, like I said, when it comes time to pull it off, I can grab that and pull. It gives me something to hold on to. If I had gone all the way to the edge, I would have to get something in there to get that to separate, and sometimes that's really hard to do. The other reason is this is going on top of a fender, and I'm going to have to attach it to the fender somewhere. Well, if I went all the way to the edge, I would have to grind it and get it softened and get it to where it's going to attach. This way, by leaving raw material there, I can sand on the fender where this is going to go on to roughen it up, and there I have material right there that is not fiberglass resin soaked. So all I have to do is soak that. Once I get this in place, soak that, and it will automatically bond it in place. So it saves me a lot of work. Okay. So literally, this resin that I'm putting down is nothing but thick resin. It's not even required, but it's going to make my life easier. Okay. The disadvantage of doing this is fiberglass gets its strength and weight ratio by having the cloth to resin ratio correct. Okay, I am purposely putting too much resin in this. Resin's obviously a whole lot heavier than the cloth, so this piece is going to be significantly heavier than the optimum. I've had people give me a hard time about that, but I told you why I do it. I do it so that my working with it is more pleasant. They're worried about it being the optimal lightweight, high strength, which fiberglass is. I'm lightweight, medium lightweight, high strength, and make it pleasant to work with. All right. Doubt you can see it, but there's air pockets all over this thing. So that's why I say be careful about how much you mix up. I broke my rule of only mixing up 1.5 cups at a time. I mixed up 4 cups at a time, which was very aggressive. And I should have thought that I would be talking and showing, and I wouldn't be able to work quite as fast as I do when I'm not recording. All right. You can also see, I don't know if you can see it, there's a big area right here where there's a lot of resin. So like I said, this part's going to be heavy. But again, don't care. The other one came out almost perfect. So you win some, you lose some. Oh, these tubes that you get with the MEK, they have, even though I have caps on them, there's no hole, so you have to take a safety pin or something to poke a hole in there so that you can get the stuff out. Well, I'm good at losing stuff, so safety pins are really hard for me to keep track of. So what I do is I pin it to my shirt. That way I always know where a safety pin is. Okay, like I said, less than perfect, but for what I'm going to do right now, it's absolutely fine. So now what I do is I wait roughly 2 hours for this to harden and cure. As soon as I stop the camera, I'm going to move this tarp, and the sun will hit this. You can see it's in the shade. It'll cure. It'll probably cure faster than 2 hours because, like I said, I mixed it a little bit hot. You saw it was already hardening on me. All right. Okay, that's it for now. So let me get around. Okay, well, like, subscribe, and hit the alarm or the bell, and you'll know next time when I put one of these out. See you then. Bye.